Hello, I am Yazi. I am starting to begin my series where I read people books. So instead of telling people to read books, we all learn in various ways. So one of the ways that I learn is literally by listening to people. So if you are a person that can't have the attention span really to focus and read some pages, because I know that's hard for my ADHD folk out there, fret not, because we can still get that information, because the information within the book is the only thing that really fucking matters. So as long as you are getting that, you are reading the book. But everybody needs to read more goddamn books, because we living in a time where people are saying a lot of things and it's clear they just ain't read shit. So I would like to start off by reading Assata. It's the autobiography of Assata Shakur. So I got tatted on the old forearm right there. We are going to learn about her life and we are going to get straight into it. I'll start off by reading the forwards, and then tomorrow join me so we can get into chapter 1. Here we go. In the 1970s, as Assata Shakur awaited trial on charges of being an accomplice to murder, I participated in a benefit at Rutgers University in New Brunswick, New Jersey, to raise funds for her legal defense. At the time, Assata was being held nearby in Middlesex County Correctional Facility for Men. Lennox Hines, a member of the Rutgers facility, had invited me to be one of the featured speakers at the benefit. Lennox was a leader of the National Conference of Black Lawyers and represented Assata in a federal lawsuit contesting the appalling conditions of her confinement in the New Jersey prison. He had previously worked on my case, and we had both served in the leadership of the National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression since its founding in 1963. Attending the benefit event were Rutgers faculty members, a sizable number of black professionals, and local activists who were the mainstay of numerous campaigns to free the political prisoners of that era. It was an upbeat event, imbued with the optimism of the times. My own recent acquittal on charges of murder, kidnapping, and conspiracy stood as a dramatic example of how we could successfully challenge the government's offenses against radical anti-racist movements. However powerful the forces arrayed against Assata, the FBI's counterintelligence program and the New York and New Jersey police organizations, no one could have persuaded us that we were not capable of building a triumphant movement for Assata's freedom. This benefit was one small step in that direction, and as we left the event, we were quite satisfied with the $3,000 we raised that afternoon. By then, every radical activist had learned to assume that our public meetings were subject to routine police and or FBI surveillance. Yet, we were entirely unprepared for what seemed like a reenactment of the 1973 events for which Assata faced charges of murder. Assata, Zaid Shakur, Sundiata Akoli had been stopped on the New Jersey Turnpike by state troopers who claimed that they had faulty taillight. The encounter left Assata critically wounded and two others, State Trooper Werner Foster and Assata's friend Zaid Shakur, dead. As a group of us left the benefit and drove down a county road towards Lennox Hines' house, where we were having a small after-party, we were quite startled when the police signaled for our car to stop. My friend Charlene Mitchell, at that time the executive director of the Alliance, was told to step out of the car along with the driver and the other person riding with us. As the policemen taunted us by clearly placing their hands on their holstered guns, I was instructed to remain in the otherwise empty automobile. Lennox, whose car we had been following, immediately doubled back and approached the police with his attorney's identification card in hand, explaining that he was our lawyer. This caused the officers to become more visibly nervous, including one who pulled a riot gun from his police car and proceeded to aim at Lennox from close range. All of us froze. We knew only too well that any innocent gesture could be construed as a reach for a weapon, and that this confrontation could easily become a recap. Ooh. See, this is fun about reading because sometimes I'll be fucking up on words too. Recapitulation of the events that had left Assata with a murder charge. The spurious explanation given by police for the ambush was a warrant for my arrest, later proven false. Though they allowed us to leave, it was only shortly after we arrived at Lennox's that we discovered they had already called for reinforcements and literally surrounded the house. With one of the first black women judges in New Jersey and several other prominent community figures at the house, we were nonetheless compelled to call on higher powers in the form of Congressman John Conyers in Washington. We figured a request for a federal escort out of the state of New Jersey might put some pressure on the local police. These were the kinds of measures and friends needed in such a volatile time. I relate this incident in detail because it may help readers of Assata's autobiography not only to focus on the political role of the police during the 1970s, but also to better understand important historical aspects of the routine racial profiling associated with current police practices. Such a historical perspective is especially important today when brazen expressions of structural racism, such as the pattern of mass imprisonment to which communities of color are subjected, are rendered invisible by the prevailing moral panic over crime. And if this were not enough, we find that at the same time such remedies as affirmative action programs and such safety nets as social welfare are being consistently disestablished. I'm going to pause real quick because that's important, because the Supreme Court is literally about to strip that shit down. Affirmative action. That's important. That's why reading is extremely important. Because this has been talked about since the fucking goddamn 70s. And these ideas have already been done for us and are meant for us to pick up and do the work in today's eyes. But motherfuckers want to act like they're the first motherfucker to think of this shit. No. Alright, that's not a part of this, but I had to let that off. Back to this shit. When Richard Nixon raised the slogan of law and order in the 1970s, it was used in part to discredit the Black liberation movement and to justify the deployment of the police, courts, and prisons against key figures in this and other radical movements of that era. Today, the ironic coupling of a declining crime rate and the consolidation of a prison industrial complex that makes increased rates of incarceration its economic necessity has facilitated the imprisonment of 2 million people in the United States. In this ideological context, political prisoners like Assata Shakur, Mumia Abu-Jamal, and Leonard Peltier are considered in popular political discourse as criminals who deserve either to be executed or to spend the rest of their lives behind bars. During the 1990s, the racist hysteria directed against Assata was resuscitated when the New Jersey State Police reputedly prevailed upon John Paul II to use the occasion of his first trip to Cuba as pressure for Fidel Castro to extradite Assata. As if this were not enough, New Jersey Governor Christine Todd Whitman offered a $50,000 reward, later doubled, for Assata's return, and Congress passed a bill calling on the government of Cuba to initiate extradition procedures. In an open letter to the Pope, Assata asks a question that should concern us all. Why, I wonder, do I warrant such attention? What do I represent that is such a threat? We would all do well to seriously ponder her questions. Why, indeed, was she constructed by the government and mass media as a consummate enemy in the 1970s, only to reemerge at the turn of the century as a singular target of governors, Congress, and the Fraternal Order of Police? What has she been made to represent? What ideological work has this representation performed? In the 1970s, Assata Shakur's image was deployed on official FBI wanted posters and in popular media as visual evidence of the terrorist motivations of the Black liberation movement. Black militants were assumed to be enemies of the state and were associated with communist challenges to capitalist democracy. The protracted search for Assata, during which she was demonized in ways that are now unimaginable, served further to justify the imprisonment of vast numbers of political activists, many of whom remain locked up today. 25 years later, the retailoring of the image of Assata as the enemy is even more damaging, omitting the original political context and representing her as a common criminal, a bank robber and murderer. This lifting of her image out of the past for very contemporary purposes serves to justify the consolidation of a vast prison industrial complex, which Assata herself has described as not only a mechanism to convert public tax money into profits for private corporations, but also an essential element of modern neoliberal capitalism. Y'all niggas need to listen to black women, goddammit. In her view, this new formation serves two purposes. One, to neutralize and contain huge segments of potentially rebellious sectors of the population. And two, to sustain a system of super exploitation where mainly black and Latino captives are imprisoned in white world overseer communities. Sounds like gentrification, goddammit. If niggas just listen to black women and what they was goddamn preaching and laid out for us, we might be in a better way. Let me continue. As the above quotation reveals, Assata remains very much engaged with the contemporary radical politics specific to the United States, even though she has been unable to visit this country since her escape from prison and her decision to settle in Cuba many years ago. As you read her extraordinary autobiography, you will discover a woman who has nothing in common with the hostile representations that refuse to expire. I urge you to reflect on what it must mean for her to have been unable to attend her mother's funeral or to visit her with her new grandchild. As you follow her life story, you will discover a compassionate human being with an unswerving commitment to justice that travels easily across racial and ethnic lines, in and out of prison, and across oceans and time. She speaks to all of us, and especially to those of us who are sequestered in a growing global network of prisons and jails. At a time when optimism has receded from our political vocabulary, she offers invaluable gifts, inspiration, and hope. Her words remind us, as Walter Benjamin once observed, that it is only for the sake of those without hope that hope is given to us. Angela Y. Davis, University of California, Santa Cruz, March 2000. We will end with that forward, and we will pick up tomorrow with the next forward. I hope y'all tap in with me, because we just getting into this shit.